Today I'm going to do a full review on Brushcreekknives Camp Cleaver, so stick around. Hi, I'm the OCD Hunter, bringing you tips, tricks, DIY hacks, and other useful ways that my OCD can help make your life a little bit more simpler. Before we begin, I was contacted by Brushcreekknives and asked if I would do a full review on their cleaver and give them customer feedback. They sent me this knife for free, and I've been working with it for several weeks. And here are my findings. As the name suggests, the Camp Cleaver is a camp knife designed for wood processing, fire starting, food prep and game processing, as well as all-around general camp tasks. The specs of the knife follow. Blade length is 6 inches from the sharpening choil to the tip. As for the cutting surface, it is longer because of the outward swoop of the belly. The overall knife length is 11.5 inches and is 1/8 of an inch thick. The Nesmik style blade varies in height from about 1.5 to 2 inches. Made from AEBL, this is Brushcreekk's current go-to for stainless steel. It is extremely tough, and they do use cryo in conjunction with their heat treat. The steel is rated at 62 on the Rockwell hardness, and as an all-around camp knife, this is a good choice of steel because it has strong stability all the way to the edge. Plus, there's not a lot of maintenance needed for this blade. The cleaver has a flat grind with a micro bevel at about 18 to 22 degrees and has their name Brushcreekk chemically etched in the spine of the steel. The handle is made from pieces of live edge burl that they stabilize and cast in an aluminite resin where they add colored dyes to. This particular handle is called apple burl with diamond. The handle also has G10 liners and pins. The thickness of the palm swell is 1 inch with the width at 1.25 inches. The length of the handle is 5 inches and the circumference is around 4 inches at the top and the bottom, and 4.75 inches at the widest part of the palm swell. Starting off with batoning, this blade is a monster. The flat grind that slowly moves to the thickness of 1/8 of an inch creates a nice wedge to split wood with no problem. It has a high polish on the steel, which is nice because no coating on the blade means no hang-ups on the grain. With the Nesmik design, the hump in the blade gives a great place to strike the knife with the baton. When I first received this knife, the first thing I thought was with the weight and the blade size that it was gonna need a finger choil to do any type of fine carving tasks. But I was surprised as I used the knife with a hammer grip just how much control I did have with it. Now there is a catch. To have this control, you have to use the bottom of the blade next to the handle because the farther away I moved from the base, the less control I had. This is true with chest lever cuts as well. Even though this is a very front-heavy blade, I had good control and it removed material easily just as long as I used the bottom part of the blade by the handle. However, this is where I ran into my first issue with the knife, and that was with the shape of the handle. The funny thing is, it was the fat handles that attracted me to Brushcreekknives in the first place. Not many knife handles fill up my hand, but this one did and I liked it. But what I found is, as I rotated in the hand to gain leverage at different cutting angles, the squared off handle digs into my hand, making it feel uncomfortable to use. I love the size, but I think it would be more ergonomical if the handle was oval or round instead of the squared off round corners. It did decent at feather sticking, but the small micro bevel did have some difficulty processing some of the wood. Plus, I ran into the same problem with the handle. Rotating the handle slightly placed one of the corners directly into the palm of my hand, making it distracting sometimes. As for trying to do feather sticks by placing the tip of the knife into the wood and then drawing the stick against the blade, the thickness of the blade keeps the blade stabilized and in place, unlike thinner knives where the blade would bow as you drew the wood across the edge. But the micro bevel doesn't do well cutting this way. As I drew the wood, it would bind pretty easily. For fine carving, such as making pot hangers or notches with push cuts, cross cuts, and X cuts, this is not the knife's strong point. It was slow and cumbersome, but let's face it, it's a camp cleaver, not a wood carver. It can accomplish these tasks, but it isn't very fun with the handle shape cutting into the hand and struggling with a larger front heavy blade. But as for chopping wood, as expected, the knife did very well and removed wood quickly and efficiently. But here I found another issue with the shape of the handle. On the butt of the knife, there are some sharp edges that made chopping almost unbearable at times. I think that by simply changing the handle style to a more rounded handle, that this knife would be a little bit more enjoyable to use. I did some chopping on some seasoned hardwood and it did okay, but this was more of a test to see how the blade stood up to it. After beating the piece of hardwood, I checked the blade and it had no rolls or chipping of the steel. And the blade held its edge and produced the same feather stickings afterwards as before. The 90-degree spine on this knife is crazy though. It processes bark and fatwood very well and throws great sparks off of a ferro rod. As a matter of fact, this knife throws better sparks than any other knife I've ever used. Drilling with the blade does a decent job, but with the shape of the blade, it seems to give you a smaller, deeper hole, much like a drill bit, rather than a wider, smaller hole that might be used for a bow drill. As for cross-grain cutting, it did well with softer wood like pine. But trying to push the limits with seasoned hardwood, it wedged itself into the wood, making it almost impossible to remove. Other camp chores like cutting rope, there were no issues. Moving into the kitchen, it does a good job processing the food. I used it during several meals while prepping them and had no issues with it accomplishing the needed food tasks. I could get decent thin slices of tomatoes, and it went through avocados easily and was sharp enough to stab the seed to remove it. Slicing peppers was easy, and the Nesmic design made it easy to rock the blade to dice with. And of course, the large swooping blade allows for picking up your freshly chopped vegetables to put them into the recipe. Dicing something more leafy like some cilantro, it worked well too. For meat processing, I used some chicken to see how well the cleaver cut. And with a simple pressure on the back of the blade, it made quick work of going through the bone. As for the skinning, you could choke up on it to skin some game in the field, but with the size and the weight of the blade, it would not be my first choice. And of course, for those who want a little more dramatic demo of the cleaver, one simple chop and you're through the meat and bone with no issue. So there you have it, my full review of Brushcreekknives Camp Cleaver. It did well with wood processing, food prep, and other camp chores. And it did okay with carving. But let's face it, there's not one knife out there that is made to handle all tasks perfectly. The blade held up very well and I never had to resharpen it during any of the tasks. Plus, there was no rolling or chipping of the blade. But keep in mind that Brushcreekknives does back their knives and they do offer a warranty for anything damaged or broken during normal use. They will fix or replace. My only really issue was the ergonomics of the handle during some of the tasks. So what it's designed for, it does well. You can grab firewood, process and ignite it, then move to food prep and cooking all with one knife. I'm the OCD Hunter, and I hope that my continual painstaking practice of changing, fixing, and improving on ideas will help you out in your endeavors. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click that bell next to the subscribe button to get notified of new videos. Comments are always welcome.